Around 10,000 years ago, North America was going through a major environmental transformation as the last ice age was coming to an end. For thousands of years, enormous sheets of ice had covered large parts of the continent, especially in the northern regions. As global temperatures gradually increased, these glaciers began to melt and retreat. This process dramatically changed the landscape, creating new rivers, lakes, valleys, and forests. Areas that were once frozen and uninhabitable slowly became suitable for plants, animals, and human settlement. The changing climate affected every aspect of life. Many large Ice Age animals, such as mammoths and mastodons, faced increasing challenges as their habitats changed. New species of plants spread across the continent, creating different ecosystems that provided fresh sources of food for both animals and humans. Early inhabitants had to constantly adapt to these environmental changes, learning where animals migrated, where edible plants grew, and how seasonal weather patterns affected their survival. The melting glaciers also opened new migration routes and living areas. Human groups could travel farther into regions that had previously been blocked by ice. As they explored these new territories, they developed knowledge of local resources and adapted their hunting and gathering techniques to different environments. The end of the Ice Age was not a sudden event, but a gradual process that shaped the lives of people across North America, influencing where they lived, how they found food, and how their societies developed over time. About 10,000 years ago, most people in North America lived in small groups known as bands. These groups often consisted of several families who traveled, hunted, gathered food, and lived together. Unlike modern cities and towns, there were no permanent large settlements for most communities. Life was highly mobile because people needed to follow the seasonal availability of food, water, and other natural resources. The size of these groups was usually small, which made it easier to move from one location to another. A large group would have required more food and resources, making survival more difficult. By staying in smaller communities, people could travel efficiently and quickly adapt to changing environmental conditions. They often established temporary camps near rivers, lakes, forests, or open grasslands where food was abundant. Mobility was an essential part of daily life. Hunters followed migrating herds of animals such as bison and deer, while gatherers searched for berries, nuts, roots, and edible plants. When resources became scarce in one area, the group would move to a new location. This constant movement required careful planning and a deep understanding of the natural world. People knew when certain plants would be available, where animals were likely to travel, and which locations offered the best opportunities for survival. These small groups depended heavily on cooperation. Hunting large animals required teamwork, communication, and coordination. Members of the group shared responsibilities such as gathering food, making tools, caring for children, preparing meals, and constructing shelters. Knowledge and skills were passed from older generations to younger ones, helping ensure the survival of the community. Social bonds were extremely important. Living in close-knit groups encouraged cooperation, trust, and mutual support. During difficult times, such as harsh weather or poor hunting seasons, group members relied on one another for assistance. This strong sense of community helped people overcome the many challenges of life in a changing and often unpredictable environment. Because they moved frequently, their shelters were usually temporary and easy to construct. Depending on the region and available materials, shelters could be made from wooden poles, branches, grass, or animal hides. These structures provided protection from the weather while allowing the group to relocate whenever necessary. The ability to live as mobile communities enabled early people to successfully adapt to diverse landscapes across North America, from forests and plains to river valleys and coastal regions. For people living in North America 10,000 years ago, survival was a constant challenge that required careful attention to the environment and its resources. Every day was focused on meeting three basic needs: food, clean water, and safe shelter. Without modern tools or permanent homes, early communities had to rely entirely on nature and their knowledge of the land to stay alive. Food was the most important requirement for survival. People did not have farms or domesticated animals in the early period, so they depended on hunting wild animals and gathering plants. They observed animal movements closely, learning migration patterns and seasonal behaviors to improve their chances of a successful hunt. They also gathered edible plants such as berries, roots, seeds, and nuts, which provided essential nutrients when hunting was not successful. Knowledge of which plants were safe to eat and which were poisonous was extremely important and often passed down through generations. Water sources were equally essential. Early people usually settled near rivers, lakes, streams, or natural springs because these provided fresh drinking water. They also used water for cooking, cleaning, and processing food. However, finding clean and safe water was not always easy. People had to observe natural signs, follow animal tracks, and sometimes travel long distances to reach reliable water sources. Living near water also increased the chances of encountering animals, which made these locations ideal for both hunting and gathering. Shelter played a major role in protecting people from harsh weather conditions such as cold winters, heavy rain, strong winds, and intense heat. Since the climate was still adjusting after the Ice Age, conditions could be unpredictable and sometimes extreme. Early shelters were built using whatever materials were available in the environment, such as wood, branches, animal hides, leaves, and grass. These structures were often temporary and designed to be quickly assembled and disassembled, allowing groups to move easily when needed. In colder regions, people used animal skins to create warm coverings and insulated shelters that could protect them from freezing temperatures. In warmer areas, lighter shelters made from plant materials provided shade and airflow. The design of these shelters depended on local geography and climate conditions, showing how adaptable early humans were to different environments. Survival also required careful planning and teamwork. Members of the group shared responsibilities such as collecting firewood, preparing food, maintaining shelters, and protecting the community from predators. Fire was an especially important tool, used not only for cooking but also for warmth, light, and protection. It also helped keep dangerous animals away during the night. Hunting was one of the most important and essential activities for survival in North America 10,000 years ago. Since agriculture had not yet fully developed in most regions, people depended heavily on wild animals for their food supply. Hunting provided not only meat, but also many other valuable resources that were necessary for daily life, including bones, hides, and fat. Because of this, hunting was not just an activity for food, it was central to survival and shaped the entire way early people lived. Early hunters had to understand the behavior of animals in great detail. They observed migration routes, feeding patterns, and seasonal movements of large animals such as bison, deer, elk, and in earlier periods, mammoths and mastodons. This deep knowledge of wildlife allowed them to predict where animals would travel and when they would appear in certain areas. Hunting was often planned around these natural cycles, and groups would move to follow herds across plains, forests, and valleys. Hunting was rarely a solo activity. It usually required teamwork and coordination among several members of the group. Hunters would work together to surround or guide animals into confined areas such as narrow valleys or natural traps. Some individuals would drive the animals toward others waiting with spears or other weapons. This type of group hunting increased the chances of success and reduced the risk involved in confronting large and powerful animals. The tools used for hunting were simple but carefully crafted. People used stone-tipped spears, wooden shafts, and sharpened tools made from bones or stones. These tools were made through a process of shaping rocks into sharp edges, which could then be attached to wooden handles using natural bindings such as plant fibers or animal sinew. Although these tools were basic compared to modern weapons, they were highly effective when used skillfully and in groups. Hunting also required physical strength, patience, and strategy. Hunters often had to track animals over long distances, sometimes for hours or even days, following footprints, broken branches, and other signs in the environment. Silent movement and careful observation were necessary to avoid scaring away prey. In some cases, hunters used natural landscapes like cliffs or water bodies to trap animals, making the hunt more efficient. After a successful hunt, every part of the animal was used. The meat was shared among the group and cooked over fire. The hides were used to make clothing, blankets, and shelter coverings that protected people from harsh weather conditions. Bones and antlers were shaped into tools, needles, and weapons, while fat was sometimes used for cooking or as a source of energy. This careful use of resources ensured that nothing was wasted and reflected a deep respect for nature. Hunting also played a social role within early communities. It strengthened cooperation and trust among group members, as success depended on teamwork. Skills were passed down from experienced hunters to younger members, ensuring that knowledge continued through generations. This shared experience of hunting helped build strong social bonds and contributed to the survival and stability of early human groups across North America. During the time period around 10,000 years ago in North America, the landscape was home to a wide variety of large Ice Age animals that played a central role in human survival. Among the most important of these were mammoths, mastodons, bison, and deer. These animals were not only a major source of food, but also provided materials that were essential for clothing, tools, and shelter construction. The presence of such large animals shaped the way early humans planned their movements, organized their hunts, and structured their daily lives. Mammoths were among the most iconic Ice Age animals. They were massive, elephant-like creatures covered in thick fur, adapted to cold environments. Because of their size, they provided an enormous amount of meat when successfully hunted. However, hunting mammoths was extremely dangerous and required careful planning and coordination. Groups of hunters would often use strategic methods such as driving them into natural traps like ravines or boggy ground where movement was difficult. Even after their extinction began, mammoths remained an important part of early human survival strategies in certain regions. Mastodons were closely related to mammoths, but had different physical characteristics and feeding habits. They preferred forested areas and mainly ate leaves, twigs, and branches. This meant that humans often encountered mastodons in wooded environments rather than open plains. Like mammoths, mastodons were large and powerful animals, making them both valuable and dangerous targets. Their meat provided essential nutrition, while their bones and tusks were used to create tools and weapons. Bison were another extremely important resource for early communities. Unlike mammoths and mastodons, bison were more commonly found in herds across the grasslands and plains. Their group behavior made them both easier to locate and more challenging to hunt. Early hunters learned to track entire herds and use coordinated strategies to separate individuals or drive them into confined areas. Bison provided not only meat but also thick hides, which were especially valuable for making warm clothing, blankets, and durable shelter coverings that could withstand harsh weather conditions. Deer were also widely hunted and were an essential part of the diet for many groups. Unlike large Ice Age megafauna, deer were smaller, faster, and more agile, requiring different hunting techniques. Hunters often relied on stealth, tracking skills, and patience to successfully capture them. Deer were commonly found in forested and mixed environments, making them accessible across a wide range of regions. Their meat was a reliable food source, while their skins were used for clothing and their bones for crafting tools. These animals were not only important individually, but also influenced migration patterns of early human groups. People often followed herds of bison or seasonal movements of deer to ensure a steady supply of food. The presence or absence of these animals in certain regions directly affected where communities settled temporarily. Knowledge of animal behavior, seasonal changes, and environmental conditions became essential for survival and long-term planning. The relationship between early humans and these animals was deeply interconnected. Every successful hunt required understanding, patience, and cooperation, while every animal provided multiple resources that supported life. This dependence on large mammals shaped cultural practices, survival strategies, and the overall development of early societies across North America. In North America around 10,000 years ago, early humans relied heavily on simple but highly effective tools made from natural materials, especially stone. Among the most important hunting tools were stone-tipped spears, which played a crucial role in survival. These tools were the result of careful craftsmanship, patience, and deep understanding of available resources in the environment. Even though technology was primitive compared to modern standards, these tools were powerful enough to hunt large and dangerous animals. Stone-tipped spears were usually made by attaching a sharpened stone point to a long wooden shaft. The stone was carefully shaped through a process called flint knapping, where harder rocks were struck against each other to create sharp edges and pointed tips. These stone points were often made from materials like flint, chert, or obsidian, which could be fractured in a controlled way to produce extremely sharp surfaces. Once the stone was shaped, it was firmly attached to a wooden stick using natural adhesives such as tree resin, plant fibers, and animal sinew. The wooden shafts used for spears were selected carefully from strong and flexible trees or branches. They needed to be long enough to provide distance between the hunter and the animal, reducing the risk of injury during a hunt. In many cases, hunters would harden the tips of wooden spears by lightly burning them in fire, making them stronger and more durable before attaching stone points. These spears were not the only tools used in hunting. Early people also created a variety of other simple tools such as knives, scrapers, and cutting instruments. Stone knives were used to butcher animals after a successful hunt, while scrapers helped remove fat and flesh from animal hides. Bone tools were also common, including needles and hooks, which were used in preparing clothing and processing animal products. Different hunting tools were adapted for different types of animals and environments. For large animals like bison or mammoths, heavier and stronger spear points were required to penetrate thick skin and muscle. For smaller animals, lighter tools and more precise techniques were used. This variety in tool design shows how early humans developed specialized knowledge based on their surroundings and needs. Using these tools required skill, strength, and coordination. Hunters had to aim accurately while maintaining a safe distance from dangerous prey. In group hunts, spears were often used in combination with strategic driving techniques, where animals were guided toward hunters positioned in specific locations. Timing and teamwork were essential for success. Toolmaking was also a highly important cultural activity. Knowledge of how to select stones, shape them, and attach them properly was passed down from experienced individuals to younger members of the group. This transmission of skills ensured that each generation could continue to survive and improve upon earlier techniques. These simple tools represented more than just weapons. They were essential survival technologies that allowed early humans to adapt to a wide range of environments across North America. In addition to hunting animals, early humans in North America around 10,000 years ago relied heavily on gathering wild plants as an essential part of their diet. This activity, often called gathering or foraging, played a crucial role in survival because it provided a steady and reliable source of food when hunting was unsuccessful or when large game was not available. Plant-based foods also offered important nutrients, vitamins, and energy that complemented the protein obtained from meat. Early people had an intimate knowledge of their natural environment. They carefully observed which plants were safe to eat and which were poisonous. This knowledge was not random, but developed over many generations through experience, trial, and careful observation. Older members of the group passed this information to younger ones, teaching them how to identify edible plants, when they were in season, and where they could be found. Berries were one of the most commonly gathered foods. Depending on the region and season, people collected wild strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, and other native fruits. These berries were often eaten fresh, but in some cases, they were dried in the sun to preserve them for later use. Dried berries could be stored for longer periods, making them valuable during times when fresh food was scarce. Nuts were another important food source. Early people gathered acorns, walnuts, hazelnuts, and other wild nuts found in forests and wooded areas. Nuts were rich in fats and calories, which provided long-lasting energy, especially important during colder months. However, some nuts like acorns required processing to remove bitterness or toxins. This often involved soaking, grinding, or roasting them before they could be safely eaten. Roots and tubers were also widely collected. These underground plant parts were often dug out using simple tools made of wood or bone. Roots provided carbohydrates and energy, making them an important part of the diet. Many roots could be stored for short periods or cooked over fire to improve taste and digestibility. Gathering roots required knowledge of soil conditions and plant growth cycles, as they were not always visible on the surface. Wild plants, including leafy greens, seeds, and herbs, also contributed to daily nutrition. Some plants were used not only for food but also for medicinal purposes. Early communities understood that certain herbs could help treat illnesses, reduce pain, or aid digestion. This early form of herbal knowledge was an important part of survival and healthcare in prehistoric times. Gathering food was usually carried out by women, children, and elders in many groups, although men also participated when available. It was often done in small teams or family units, which allowed for efficient searching of large areas. While hunters traveled long distances in search of animals, gatherers often worked closer to campsites, ensuring a continuous supply of plant-based food. The success of gathering depended on seasonal changes. Different plants were available at different times of the year, so early humans had to track seasonal cycles carefully. Spring and summer often provided abundant berries and greens, while autumn was the main season for collecting nuts and storing food for winter. This seasonal rhythm shaped how communities moved and organized their daily activities. Gathered foods were not only eaten immediately, but also stored and preserved for later use. Drying, roasting, and sometimes grinding were common methods used to extend the shelf life of plant foods. This ability to store food helped early humans survive periods of scarcity and supported the development of more stable living patterns in certain regions. In North America around 10,000 years ago, animal skins were one of the most valuable resources for early human survival. After a successful hunt, animals were not only used for food but also for their hides, which played a critical role in protecting people from harsh environmental conditions. Since the climate was still changing after the Ice Age, temperatures could be extremely cold in some regions and unpredictable in others. Animal skins became essential for maintaining warmth, comfort, and safety in daily life. The process of using animal skins began immediately after a hunt. Once an animal was killed, the skin had to be carefully removed to avoid damage. Early humans used sharp stone tools and scrapers to separate the hide from the flesh. This required skill and experience, as tearing or damaging the skin would reduce its usefulness. Every part of the process was done with care because hides were too valuable to waste. After removal, the skin went through a process of cleaning and preparation. Fat, meat, and other tissue were scraped off using stone or bone tools. This step was important because any remaining flesh could cause the skin to rot. Once cleaned, the hides were often stretched and dried in the sun or near controlled fire. This helped preserve them and prevent decay, making them suitable for long-term use. In many cases, animal skins were softened and treated further to make them more flexible and comfortable. Early people likely used natural materials such as animal brains, fats, or plant extracts to soften the hides. This process helped transform stiff raw skins into usable leather-like material that could be shaped into clothing or shelter coverings. Repeated stretching and working of the hide also improved its texture and durability. Animal skins were primarily used to make clothing, which was essential for surviving cold temperatures. People wrapped hides around their bodies to protect themselves from wind, rain, and freezing conditions. These garments were often layered, with thicker skins used for outer protection and softer ones worn closer to the body. Clothing designs varied depending on climate, available animals, and cultural practices within different groups. Footwear was also created from animal hides. Simple moccasin-like coverings protected feet from rough terrain, cold ground, and sharp objects. These were usually made by wrapping and stitching soft leather around the feet using sinew or plant fibers. Although simple, this type of footwear was highly effective in allowing people to travel long distances across forests, plains, and rocky landscapes. In addition to clothing, animal skins were used to build shelters. Large hides were stretched over wooden frames made from branches or poles to create tents or temporary dwellings. These coverings helped block wind, rain, and snow while also retaining warmth inside the shelter. The flexibility of hides made it easy to construct and dismantle shelters quickly, which was important for mobile groups that frequently moved in search of food. Inside shelters, animal skins were also used as bedding and insulation. People laid hides on the ground to create a barrier between themselves and the cold earth. Additional skins were used as blankets to provide warmth during sleep. In colder regions, multiple layers of hides were combined to improve insulation and protect against freezing nighttime temperatures. Different types of animals produced different qualities of skins. For example, Thicker hides from larger animals provided strong protection and insulation, while softer skins from smaller animals were used for more flexible clothing. This variety allowed early people to choose materials based on specific needs and environmental conditions. Animal skins also held social and practical value within communities. Skilled preparation of hides required knowledge and experience, and those who were good at this work were highly valued. The process of turning raw hides into usable materials was time-consuming and required cooperation among group members, especially during large hunts where multiple animals were processed at once. As time passed, around 10,000 years ago in North America, early human groups began to change from simple, small, highly mobile bands into more structured and organized communities. This development did not happen suddenly, but slowly over many generations as people learned from experience how to survive more efficiently in different environments. Increased knowledge of seasons, animal behavior, plant cycles. One of the most important changes was the improvement in cooperation among group members. Early humans realized that survival was much easier when people worked together instead of acting individually. Tasks such as hunting large animals, gathering food, building shelters, and protecting the group required coordination and trust. As a result, people began to assign roles based on skills and experience. Some individuals became more skilled hunters, others specialized in toolmaking, while others focused on gathering or preparing food. Leadership also started to emerge in many groups. Certain individuals, often older and more experienced members, gained respect because of their knowledge and decision-making abilities. These leaders helped organize group movements, decide when and where to hunt, and guide the community during difficult seasons. Leadership was not based on formal power structures like in modern societies, but rather on trust, wisdom, and proven survival skills. Communication within groups became increasingly important. People developed better ways of sharing information about animal movements, weather changes, and safe locations for food and water. This exchange of knowledge allowed groups to respond more quickly to environmental challenges. Storytelling and verbal teaching became key methods for passing down survival skills, cultural practices, and environmental knowledge from one generation to the next. As communities became more organized, they also started to develop stronger social bonds. Living and working closely together created a sense of responsibility and connection among group members. Sharing food, helping during hunts, and protecting each other from danger strengthened unity within the group. These social relationships were essential, especially during harsh seasons when food was scarce or when environmental conditions became difficult. Trade and exchange between different groups also began to develop in some regions. Early humans sometimes exchanged tools, materials, or food resources with neighboring groups. For example, stone materials suitable for making tools might be traded for animal hides or food items. This exchange of goods helped spread knowledge and improve survival chances by allowing groups to access resources not available in their own territory. Daily life became more structured as communities learned to plan ahead. Instead of reacting only to immediate needs, people began preparing for future challenges. Food storage techniques, seasonal migration planning, and tool preparation became part of regular life. These developments reduced the risks of starvation and improved long-term survival. Shelter construction and camp organization also became more systematic. Camps were often arranged in ways that made daily tasks easier, such as placing cooking areas, sleeping areas, and tool-making zones in specific locations. This organization helped improve efficiency and safety within the group. Even though these communities were still small compared to modern societies, their growing level of cooperation marked an important step in human development. The ability to work together, share responsibilities, and plan for the future helped early humans adapt more successfully to changing environments and laid the groundwork for more advanced forms of society that would develop later across North America. The small hunter-gatherer communities that lived in North America around 10,000 years ago played a major role in shaping the future development of human societies across the continent. Even though they did not build large cities or permanent kingdoms, their way of life created the early foundations of social organization, survival strategies, and cultural practices that would influence later civilizations. Over time, the knowledge they developed about land, animals, seasons, and resources became the base upon which more advanced societies were built. One of the most important contributions of these early groups was their deep understanding of the natural environment. Through constant observation and experience, they learned how to live in different climates, how to track animal migrations, and how to identify useful plants for food and medicine. This knowledge was gradually refined and passed down through generations, becoming a form of environmental wisdom that later societies relied on when they began to settle in larger communities and experiment with early agriculture and more permanent settlements. Their early systems of cooperation, sharing, and group survival also influenced the way future societies were structured. The importance of teamwork in hunting, gathering, and protecting the group developed into more complex social systems over time. As populations slowly increased and groups began to settle more permanently, these basic social patterns evolved into organized leadership structures, division of labor, and community-based decision-making that became essential in later cultures across different regions of North America.